Hi, my name's Lisa and I live in this tiny 1969 vintage caravan, traveling all around the place and doing a little bit of saxophone busking on the side for a bit of extra income. The reason I specified in my videos older women over 50 is because that's who I am. So I can't speak on anyone else's experience of what this life is like. I can speak on my personal experience and the personal experience of the women who've told me their stories that I've met on the road, because obviously we connect with each other. You see someone in a similar situation to you, you're going to strike up a conversation, and so that's my particular focus. Oh my goodness, I have so much to say about the responses to those videos about me talking about the housing crisis and the homelessness issue. Have just brought in so many responses from so many different people with so many different points of view, and I really want to address as many of them as possible. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm just doing my laundry at the moment, and I've got this little automatic machine now, which is kind of cool. Originally I used to do it in my laundry tub basket thing that I washed the dog in, and I used to put my washing in there and I'd stomp on it, and just let it soak, and I used to call it doing the squashing because that was how I did my washing. And then I upgraded. Another camper was selling a little twin tub, and I bought that little twin tub. It was like $80, $100, I can't remember. And I kept doing that for the last few years, which was kind of labor intensive because being that I have to keep it outside, I have to manually fill the water and make sure it's full, and then turn it from the washing side to the spin side, and then back into the side, fill it again, rinse it. It was an all-day process just to keep an eye on it. Keep it going and do my few different loads, because I like to separate whites and colours and things like that. And then I saw someone was selling this little automatic one outside the camping office for $100, and I was like, oh, automatic would be nice. What a luxury. Basically, if I go to the laundromat, it costs me like over $20 every time I do my washing, and I just can't afford to be doing that every week, So this little machine I managed to buy for $100, and then I sold the little twin tub for $80 that I think I had paid for it. So in actual fact, I got an automatic washing machine for $20, which I was pretty stoked about. It's made life so much easier for me because I just put it on, I hook it up to the hose and the power, and walk away, and when it's finished it sings me this little song and lets me know that it's done. Oh, one more plate. Anyway, that's that. I was going to show you too, like the whole how I cook my breakfast in the morning, how I make my eggs these days in the fry pan now that I've gotten rid of the microwave, and heating up the kettle to heat the water to do the dishes, and pumping this water like that. It's all a rigmarole, It's not easy, and it's not even as easy as my neighbours in caravans who have flowing hot water from their taps that just turn on because they have pumps and showers and toilets on board and things like that. I don't have any of those fancy things, so it's a little bit more goes into everything I do, basically. So once I've got this all sorted and that laundry is ticking away nicely out there, I'm going to sit down and talk about some of these things that have come up. Let's get real. Let's talk about the housing crisis and homelessness and some of your comments, which I appreciate all of them very much. Thank you. My next door neighbour, she leaves her dog in the caravan when she goes out, and it just cries the whole time. It's so sad. It's like this plaintive little, oh. I've told her it cries all the time, and anyway, yeah, kind of breaks my heart. Makes me a little bit anxious. The first video that I said the reality of the housing crisis for women over 50 has gotten, I think, almost 70,000 views now. Wow. Kind of crazy. It's obviously a really important conversation that we need to have, and that is striking a chord with a lot of people in a lot of different scenarios, not just people who are living in vans or just women over 50. Like, it's, you know, we can agree that across the board there's a lot of housing stress and distress and financial strain and hardship for even people who I would deem lucky enough to own their own homes. You know, like, those people are still freaking out and struggling too because of rising costs of everything. And I think that's why they were drawn to my video, was because there was a lot of people that were thinking, like, they could see how easily they could become, you know, like this in this situation. And it is surprising and kind of hurtful that some people were saying things like, you know, I think I said, like, you should have planned better, or this sort of blaming people for the situation that they end up in is really cold-hearted, and often comes from a place of obviously comfort and this mindset, which I think, you know, I often tell people the difference between Australia and America being that I am both nationalities and have lived in both countries long enough to feel like I'm able to make, you know, some assessments on the differences and the similarities between our country. America, the United States, when I speak of America, I obviously mean the United States, is really based on a principle of, like, politically and economically, the capitalist society, based on the fact that if you work very hard, you should be able to retain all the benefits of your hard work, and that's sort of celebrated as part of the culture. People who have made it revered, and so you have, you know, there was always the land of opportunity. You could go there and the cost of living was cheap and you could make more money, and you know, a lot of people fled to that country for those reasons. It was the land of hopes and dreams, and that's, you know, definitely shown to be proven true. I know a lot of people who relocated from Australia, New Zealand, who went over there and made it big, and I certainly gave it my very best shot. And yeah, my background situation with my business was that I had a business that I started here. It became way bigger in the United States than it ever was here in Australia. The cost of running the business here in Australia, the overheads were so high, the cost of postage, the fact that Australia Post kept losing items in the mail, costing me money to replace them. It was just, it got to the point where I couldn't justify running a business here in Australia. And meanwhile, the cost of me sending my items across to the United States was so ridiculously expensive that I decided to just relocate the whole business to the United States. And yeah, the market is huger. It's a numbers game. There's a lot more people, so with a lot more people, the cost per product of anything can remain cheaper because the market is so much huger. It's basic economics. And you know, I was excited because I thought I might actually get around to buying a house. When I first moved there, the little town that I was living in, you could buy a house for $70,000. In fact, I put an offer in on what was my dream house right next door to the post office. I'd walk past it every day, and it was $70,000. Cutest little vintage retro 2-story house. It even had like an Airstream trailer out the back, and I loved that place so much. And I think I'd had about $5,000 I could use as a deposit, as a down payment. It was vendor finance. It was all sounding perfect. And when I went and put my offer in, unfortunately I missed out because another person that was interested had $5,000 more as a down payment than I had, and I lost that dream. And I just watched as I lived there, the prices just escalate to the, you know, that same house would be over $300,000. And yeah, and the dream ended when someone copied my brilliant idea, like exactly copied it, and started marketing it a lot more aggressively than me. And not just aggressively marketing it, but aggressively marketing while spreading rumors that I had copied them, and telling everyone that I had copied them. basically ruined it for me psychologically and economically, to the point where I couldn't sustain it any longer, and my health really suffered as a result, because stress obviously exacerbates autoimmune conditions. So a little bit of background. So yeah, the whole ethos of and that's the other problem. The downside of that kind of culture is it is a sort of a dog eat dog kind of existence, where people don't care who they have to crush and climb over to get to the top. They kind of will. And I experienced that firsthand, and I'm not really a fight back kind of person. Someone said, oh, you could have sued them. Like, I had the whole thing trademarked and registered, and I could have. I spoke to a lawyer, and they said they would need me to deposit $30,000 into their trust account before they could even take on the case, which I didn't have that kind of money. So sadly, I had to walk away and came back here with the hopes that maybe somewhere there would be a place in Australia for me where I could find my home that I'd been working so hard for pretty much since my divorce. Like, I divorced in the year 2000. I lost my home that I thought I'd be in forever. Desperately tried to get into another house. I actually applied again for another house that was around $70,000 in a really cheap part of Brisbane at the time, 2000, 2001. And the bank turned me down for finance, because at that stage, as a single mother, I was working, but a large portion of my income was child support from my ex-husband, and they told me they could not take child support into account when it came to judging my affordability. They could only calculate 25% of that as income, because their argument was that my ex-husband's circumstances could change and that would alter my income. And I was like, yeah, but that could have happened if we were still married too, like, nobody ever said that. Like, when we applied for a house together and we were married, nobody said they were only going to take 25% of my income because my circumstances could change. It really was a discrimination against women in my situation, newly divorced. Of course, things like first homeowners grants and things like that are available now weren't available when we first bought our first home together, and they certainly weren't available to a newly divorced woman is no longer classed as a first home buyer if she's previously bought a home with her husband. So there were a lot of things that made it really difficult for me to get my foot back in that property door. And yeah, that's a common story, I guess. I did draw on my limited superannuation that I had as I went through the divorce process, and was in a battle to try and keep the home that I did have. Long and complicated story, but basically I ended up in a relationship post-divorce with somebody who paid out the remaining home loan on that property because he didn't want me financially involved with my ex-husband. That turned out to be a very unhealthy, toxic relationship, and he ended up suing me and taking my property away from me after he'd told me that he'd pay it out and he wanted me to have it, but obviously he only wanted me to have it if we were still together. So I lost that as well, and that's when I briefly did become homeless as a single mum for a while there, sleeping on friends' couches and things. And then I ended up moving into a caravan park. I did have another relationship that I moved into with somebody because I was really struggling. A very, very toxic relationship. Yeah, it was bad, and I was in a really desperate situation because I knew I couldn't afford to live on my own, raise my children on my own. That's a common story too. This is the thing about the sequence of events, I've probably been too trusting and too willing to see the best in people to not see certain red flags that have come up. Yeah, I don't like talking about too much of the trauma, but I did tell you I'd give you a background as to why I ended up like this, and to counter those people that said I should have planned it better And I still had another comment come in like that even yesterday. You know, that the onus was on me to have provided for my own future better. Gosh, I tried. I really tried. I tried so hard. And that's my washing machine. It's behind me. It sings me that little song. That's a good break point. I'm going to take that as a time to break before I kind of delve into the next part of this, because I'm already struggling to even talk about what happened next, that things got really bad. So I'll take a wee break, hang my washing out, and I'll come back to you guys. Pixie's enjoying some sunshine time on the long lead. Just to show you, I don't always wear pink. I'll do my dark stuff first. Often an argument that I hear about why we couldn't have land developed into housing for people long term is because of grey water. Now, as you can see, everyone here, this is the showgrounds, right? I always ask, what do you want me to do with grey water? Now, in a proper caravan park, often they'll have a drain that goes into like the same sewer water, and your grey water runs into that. Here and in most country places, they say just run it onto the ground, as long as it's not under your caravan. So all our hoses are just going to the back, and that's been like that way here for years and years and years. Nobody has a problem with it. When I actually went to a tiny home symposium that was being held after some women who had been tiny homes and caravans living on another woman's private rural property on the Sunshine Coast. They'd been paying a minimal amount, and you know, they were very happy. They were helping her with the garden and things around the property. Perfect scenario. And a neighbour complained, and they were evicted, and the police were called and told that it was illegal to do what they were doing, which was ridiculous. And yeah, so they had this whole symposium, like, how can we change the situation so that people in these situations can legally live on people's land like that? And the council member said, you know, the biggest argument against that is the situation with wastewater and disposal and things like that, and the infrastructure required. Now, most people who are living off-grid have composting toilets, and the grey water situation, you know, as far as what comes out of your sink, they call that grey water as opposed to sewage, which would be black water. And I said, well, you know, I camp at showgrounds, and they just tell us to run the hose out the back and onto the ground. And it's been like that forever, and nobody's ever had a problem with that. And that's, you know, the council runs most of these places and has, anyway. Often caravan parks will do that too in the country, you know. They're like, yeah, put it onto a tree or something, like, we need that water. And that's the water that, when I owned a property, we used to use the water in the grey water tank to actually put a sprinkler on and water the whole lawn with it. So it's not bad water. It's water that's just, all I've done with it is brush my teeth, wash my dishes, and do my laundry. And I you know, use earth-friendly products when I do that, as most people who are living off-grid do. Like, we're very earth-conscious people that want to live off-grid generally. So as far as infrastructure on someone else's land, you know, if you had your own composting toilet and you were happy to just let the grey water just run onto the ground. And I always think it's kind of funny, even about the toileting thing. Like, you know, I've been to many off-grid campsites that are out in the bush, and there was no toilet facilities or amenities at all. And the solution to that was, you know, I said to someone recently when I was off-grid, they were like, you know, oh no, it was at a festival, and the portaloos were full to overflowing and run out of water, and they were disgusting, and nobody wanted to use them anymore. And I said to my camping neighbour, like, oh, haven't you got an outdoor toilet? And he's looked at me like, what do you mean? He was in a van. And I reached into my cupboard down here, into my tool cupboard, and pulled out a hand trowel and said, there you go, get yourself one of these, you know, I'll leave it here, you can borrow it whenever you want. And that was what we did. We'd go out in the bush, find a tree, dig a hole, do our business, cover it up, You know, cows do it, animals do it. They just poop and pee all over the ground. Nobody has a problem with that. It's just we've gotten so set on this modern way of living that we can't even conceive of it going back to another way. But there are natural ways and eco-conscious ways to live at one with the earth without much infrastructure required. I'm not suggesting like the plan that I was talking about on farmers' lands. Like, I think it's really uncool that some van lifers, like a lot of tourists and stuff, are ruining free camps because, and I've seen it, they'll literally poop on the ground, leave heaps of toilet paper and just leave it sitting there with flies all over it. That's disgusting. Don't do that. Like, it costs you a few bucks for a hand trowel. Like, dig a hole at the very least. This is my potty. That's my toilet. And I keep it inside this very subtle milk crate that I've covered with a little, I use the same fabric that I used on my upholstery, so it just looks like a little stool. And it's got one side open, so the potty just slips in under there. And when I use it, it sits on top. It's the perfect height. And then I pour it into one of these stainless steel. I've got two of these, 1.8 litre, very subtle. And then when I do get to a proper amenities block with toilets, like I do at the moment in the morning because it's my overnight toilet, I just walk very subtly to the toilet, tip it out, come back, and I wash it with earth-friendly toilet cleaner and boiling water and rinse it and clean it a few times, and it's ready to go for next time. So simple. And then for if you need to do number twos and you can't get to a toilet, which is pretty unusual because there's toilets most places I go, but if I can't, and you know, I'm not completely out in the bush as far as I need to dig a hole in the ground type of situation, I'm not. Sometimes it's been like I'm on the road and I haven't come across a rest area and I'm busting. I might. So I bought these compostable garbage bags that I can line my little potty with, and I can poop in there, tie it all up, and put it in the rubbish if I have to. Which I know sounds disgusting, but we do that with our dog poop. We walk around being encouraged to pick it up all the time with little plastic bags, which I use compostable bags for that as well. And we tie it in a knot and we put it in the general rubbish bin. And dog poop is sometimes pretty funky and a lot worse than human poop in my opinion. So I think that's a viable alternative if you're really stuck and you don't want to go for a fancy toilet. And I do have a fancy toilet. I have one of those little tank flush. It's called a porta potty. It cost me like $130 or $150 or something, and you're supposed to put like certain chemicals in it in the tank, and then you've got a little tank at the bottom that collects everything, and then you go off to a dump point and you empty it out. I bought it because during lockdown we had to be fully self-sufficient. I never used it since. I don't want to deal with that, and I've never had to, and I've survived without it now for a few years. So it's actually gone back into the storage shed because it took up too much room, and I was like, I just didn't want the smell of it. And to me, even though they have chemicals and things, I can tell when I walk into somebody else's van and they've got one of those type of toilets on board. I can smell it. Plastic holds smells, you know. That's why I use stainless steel bottles and a aluminium potty. Like, it doesn't, there's no hint of urine smell in my van, I assume. I'm very conscious of smell, so probably not. Anyway, that's just one of the arguments about why it wouldn't be possible to do what I've been talking about on private land. It is possible. It's possible to build amenities blocks. It's possible. Another really great suggestion somebody had was buying an actually currently established caravan park. I have had that idea. I've been to 2 caravan parks that I absolutely fell in love with. One down in Victoria, the one at Gyra, that I really loved. And they were both on the market for around $1 million. And my first thought was, you know what? If I had $1 million, I would buy these caravan parks. No infrastructure required. They've got showers, they've got toilets, they've got everything. I mean, the one down in Victoria even had a swimming pool, for goodness sakes. Like, it was gorgeous. And a home on it as well, and cabins and camp kitchens and a hall and all sorts of amazing facilities. It would be just perfect. But if I had that opportunity, I would be like, it's going to be literally just for and I know I don't mean to sound discriminatory, but for women my age and older who really need to just slow down sometimes, because it gets harder and harder as you get older and sicker. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that the homelessness with men or with young people isn't an absolute tragedy. It absolutely is. The reason I specified in my videos older women over 50 is because that's who I am. So I can't speak on anyone else's experience of what this life is like. I can speak on my personal experience and the personal experience of the women who've told me their stories that I've met on the road, because obviously we connect with each other. You see someone in a similar situation to you, you're going to strike up a conversation, and so that's my particular focus. And it's not to be discriminatory or to reduce the tragedy of the situation across the board, with all sorts of situations with housing stress and homelessness and economic strife and all sorts of issues that people face. But I can't solve the problems of the whole world. But my younger self, who studied law and hoped to be into policy and government changes, is still going to hope that maybe, even though I'd let that dream go a long time ago, maybe I could somehow influence some kind of change. And it's really silly, I know, but $20 a month I buy as RSL prize home lottery tickets, and like the houses that they have, like multi-million-dollar houses on the coast usually, and they're not my style at all, and they're not in places that I want to live in at all. But I always think to myself, if I won that prize, I would buy that piece of land, and I would buy that caravan park or whatever, and I would create a space for people like me, and because I know that there's a huge need for it. And sometimes, like some of the cruel comments I've been getting, and I don't even acknowledge them, and I'm not going to mention them individually here, but gosh, you have no idea what a difference it can make when you've just fallen down for whatever reason. Maybe it was your own fault. We all stuff up sometimes. Maybe it was a bunch of bad choices. Maybe it was something completely unexpected, like health crises and business failures and divorce and death of a loved one and rejection by family who should have been more supportive. Like, multiple reasons that these things can happen that aren't necessarily the individual's fault. Blaming homelessness on the homeless is really cruel and lacking in complete empathy and compassion. I could tell you from having fallen that just having one person reach out their hand and pull you back up just can change everything. It can change your whole outlook on the world. It reduces depression. It reduces the likelihood of people just succumbing to drugs and alcohol and wanting to numb the pain. Because I know, like, I'm a firm follower of Dr. Gabor Mate. My doctor recommended I read the book, I think it was When the Body Says No, and I've read his book, The Myth of Normal, his latest book. Amazing, beautiful doctor who's worked a lot with addiction and things like that, and he's come to the conclusion that everything is based on trauma. So, blaming homeless people for their addiction and alcohol problems, like, yeah, I know that goes on to cause a more visible problem for everybody else, but people don't just turn to drugs because they can't be bothered dealing with life. People turn to drugs and alcohol because they've been really, really hurt. And when you're really, really hurt and the world kicks you to the curb and nobody's there to help you out, you're just like, oh, well, what the heck? What's the point? What's the point of trying, So my friend Tammy sent me this morning a beautiful link, and I will link it below, to a video. And I think the channel is about invisible homelessness. About what they've done in Finland about dealing with the housing crisis. A really compassionate, caring, beautiful model that I'd love to see adopted in Australia and in the United States. And we just need some people with a heart. And a lot of these people had been living rough on the streets, and they had serious drug problems. But just having a home and a sense of belonging and feeling like somebody cared enough for them to make them feel like they were worthy enough had been enough incentive for them to change their ways and get healthy, and they're so filled with gratitude. And it was just, I had tears pouring down my face watching that video. I get teary just thinking about it right now, because it was so heartwarming to see that there is a way out of this. And like people were saying, now when they walk around the streets, they rarely see a homeless person because they've solved the problem. And how they did it was, yeah, creating whole buildings of homes for people that had their own individual space as well as communal spaces. It was beautiful. I mean, in a city type environment, that's a great option. I personally don't know that I would want to do that because I'm just not a city person, but something along those lines. But mainly the compassion. I'm stoked that some of you guys have reached out to me in that way and expressed genuine empathy, compassion, and caring, and just been so kind. It just, kindness really does make a difference in my world and everybody's world. Just, we need more of it. I've screenshotted your amazing comments, the amazing suggestions, some brilliant ideas, and I want to mention them individually and read them out because I'm so thankful for the suggestions that some of you have made, and for all the people that just were so out of touch and said negative things. Go eat worms, quite frankly, because if you don't know, you don't know. If you're not in this situation, or you haven't experienced the situation, or you don't have, at least have experienced enough challenges in your life to have compassion and empathy, because I've realized that people who have cruisy lives just don't have empathy and compassion. They haven't developed that skill. It comes from falling and knowing how much difference it made when somebody was there for you when you were falling, to become that person for somebody else when they're falling. Those of us who fall are pretty kind humans. We don't like to see anyone else struggle unnecessarily, and I see a lot of that in you guys. And I don't want to just talk about this particular situation forever, but I have so much to say on it that I've been bursting to express. So I'm going to try and sort of intermittently put videos where I'm literally dealing with this topic with back to my usual broadcasting of this is my life and this is what I get up to on a regular basis, and insights into it not being all tragic and all bad, because most of the time it's a pretty happy little place, my little pink bubble. Oh, the comments about it being a child's bedroom, oh my gosh, I've been getting that all my life, and I don't know if that's an autistic thing, that we tend to be drawn to stuffed toys and comfort things and items, and be a little bit stuck in a little childhood thing, whether that's from complex PTSD and not being allowed to have that as a child. I don't really know, but I'm not going to be made to feel bad about it. This is my space, and someone was so rude as to even say, well, then you shouldn't, if you've done it just for yourself because you've got trauma or whatever, then you shouldn't put it out there to the world. Don't watch the video. If the sight of my little cozy abode that makes me bloody happy and feel safe and nurtured, and pink is a beautiful colour. The reason I chose pink, and I've had pink in my caravans since my very first caravan like 20 years ago, is because I remember reading somewhere that they'd done a study on the effect of various colours on the mind, and that in a prison, and they discovered that if they painted the walls pink, that the prisoners were just calmer and more relaxed and less aggressive and violent. I was like, well, I like pink. I think it's a very pretty colour, and that kind of is what first inspired me to be pink, and I've been pink ever since. Yes, I'm very much in touch with my inner child. It was wounded. I have done a lot of work to heal it. I feel I have healed it. This is not about trauma for me. This makes me smile and be happy, and the fact that people feel the need to criticize me because of that, honestly, it doesn't even affect me anymore. It just rolls off my, like water off a duck's back, because it's so ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous thing to say. If you want to paint your whole bedroom grey, because grey seems to be the colour. I look around me at all these modern caravans and modern housing developments. I call them 50 Shades of Grey, 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 grey. Everything's grey these days. Like, what's the deal with grey? It seems to be the colour of the era. Grey, you know, in the 70s it was all like leery kind of mustard yellow and slime green and things like that, and those different eras have different colours, and at the moment it's grey. To me, grey is not even a colour. I hate grey. I've never thought of grey as a colour. It's just nothing. It expresses nothing. And I love rainbows, and I love, when I was a kid, and if you asked me what my favourite colour was, I'd say rainbow. I've always loved rainbows. I have crystals making rainbows when the sun shines in various directions as the day goes around. There's crystals all around. I get this beautiful rainbow effect when the sun shines on them. I love bright colours. If you are offended by my choice of decor because you live in a grey environment, then we are so worlds apart. I don't even know why you're watching my video. No one's forcing you. No one's forcing you to watch my videos. You just, if I don't like something I see on YouTube, I just scroll out and go somewhere else. I don't feel the need to tell them that I don't like the decor. Like, it's such a personal thing. And that's why I love vintage caravans, because you can decorate them exactly as you want. Not like a house where you're entertaining and having people over for dinner and there's a certain mindset of neutrality in a house. With this, it's such a private space. Nobody comes in here. Like, I don't have visitors in here. I don't hold dinner parties in here. Unless you're a super close friend or a family member, you're not going to come in here. I don't really care if you like it or not, because I freaking love it. And that's all I have to say about that. Thanks, guys. You know I love you.